this was something interesting came up. This week was Rosh Chodesh. So let's talk a little bit about the halacha. The halacha is regarding Ya'alev Yavam. And we know you're supposed to have Ya'alev Yavam as an addition to your grace after meals on, let's say, holidays and Rosh Chodesh. Now on Shabbos, we say the Retzeh edition, an extra paragraph to say there. Generally speaking, one has to somehow make up for missing that paragraph. There's a bracha to say if he catches it soon enough. If not, he had an obligation to eat a meal on that day, let's say a Sabbath day. So he'll have to basically say another grace to make up for the missing Ya'alev Yavo or Retzeh. And the Shulchan Aruch brings an exception. What's the exception? Rosh Chodesh. Rosh Chodesh, leave off the Ya'alev Yavo from your Birkas Hamazon, assuming it's the Rosh Chodesh is not the Yontif of Rosh Hashanah or it's not Shabbos. So you didn't have an obligation to eat a meal of bread on Rosh Chodesh, even though it's a midas chasidus to do so, have a special Rosh Chodesh meal. So you don't have to repeat your benching, your grace after meals. Benching is the Yiddish form of it. Why? Because you didn't have an obligation to eat the meal. So and Chol Hamoed would fall into that category. Why? Yom Tov, you have to have meals on Yom Tov, but on Chol Hamoed you don't necessarily have to have meals of bread. So Yom Tov, Chol Hamoed would be in the same category as Rosh Chodesh. In the laws of Birkat Hamazon, there the Shulchan Aruch brings an opinion, and he seems to say that this is the opinion he's endorsing there. The third meal for Shlishit is you didn't have to do that meal. So if you leave off the Retzeh from your third Shabbos meal when you were saying your grace, because you had no obligation to eat that third Shabbos meal of bread, you have a third Shabbos meal, but you could have done it according to starting with the Tosafos. You could have done it with something else, perhaps meat and some other things. The Shulchan Aruch in the laws of Shabbos brings like 4 different opinions. If you don't want to eat bread, so eat something else. Eat something that's at least mizonos, meat, some mine targima, stuff with which you can flavor your bread without the bread. Eat all the salad. Eat the hummus and the matbucha and the chopped salad without the bread. So because you could have done that, Retzeh does not have to be compensated. They don't have to have some sort of reckoning for leaving that off. Now the Vilna Gaon references Reish Tzadi Aleph, the Siman in Orach Chaim says, this rule about not having to make up the missing Retzeh, that paragraph from Birkat Hamazon from the third Shabbos meal, that's assuming like Rabbeinu Tam and others who hold that one does not have to eat bread at the third Shabbos meal. However, if one does hold that bread is a necessity at all 3 meals, including the third meal, then one also has to make up for this missing Retzeh if he would have left it off from his Birkat Hamazon at the third meal. And how does the Vilna Gaon hold? He tells you that you can check out what the Taz says. The Taz brings the basic Talmudic understanding. Who said for what reason would we believe that one would have to eat breads and specifically lechem mishnah at all 3 Shabbos meals? Because the Gemara brings it's a drasha. It said when the manna first showed up, Moshe Rabbeinu told the people to eat the manna that they had, the extra manna that they got on Friday. They got double manna on Friday, and no manna fell from heaven on the Sabbath. Moses told them, you could eat your manna from yesterday today. Normally, by tomorrow, the manna was gone or it went bad. You couldn't save manna for the next day. On a Friday, you could. Moshe Rabbeinu told them, Ichluhu hayom kayom, eat it today. Hayom lom titzu basadeh. And that pasuk he mentions hayom 3 times. So he said eating it today 3 times means you're supposed to have your double bread. Manna was like bread from heaven. Hamam tir lechem min hashamayim, as it says. That was apparently the bracha on manna. So you're supposed to eat it 3 times. And what does the Vilna Gaon hold? Well, let's first look at the Rambam. The Rambam says very clearly that he has to make all 3 of these meals of bread and of lechem mishnah, and also supposed to have wine. And ba'al yachzar klum. Basically, the 3 Shabbos meals are one din. It can't be more lenient with the third Shabbos meal. Does the Vilna Gaon agree with the Rambam? As we saw before Passover, the answer is yes. Why? Because the Vilna Gaon and the Rambam and the Zohar point out that on Erev Pesach, when you have no matzah, because they don't hold like Rabbeinu Tam also in this regard. Rabbeinu Tam said, technically speaking, Erev Pesach, you have what to eat. There's still matzah with which you do not discharge your obligation on Passover. But the Vilna Gaon and the Rambam and the Zohar felt you can't eat any matzah whatsoever all day on Erev Pesach. And therefore, because the Sabbath meal by definition is in the afternoon, and that afternoon you have nothing that's chametz to eat, because it's already forbidden to eat chametz, and you have nothing that's matzah to eat. You have nothing with which to have an official meal. You have no bread that's matzah, and you have no, let's say, cake or crackers or anything, mazonos, that's matzah, that's technically unleavened, because even that, on a normal day, you could establish a meal on that which is not supposed to be real bread. If it's possible, what you and I would call cookies and crackers and cake. So there's, if a person would eat enough of those, that's establishing a meal. It turns those into a din of bread. But he has nothing with which to make his meal on Erev Pesach, and therefore there is no third Shabbos meal that day. It's impossible. So there you go. The Rambam and the Vilna hold that really all three Shabbos meals are supposed to be with bread. Unlike the more lenient opinions that are mentioned in the Shulchan Aruch and elsewhere, they hold 100%. You have to have your third Shabbos meal no different from your second one. And the Ashrei me who can eat meat and drink wine also at the third Shabbos meal, it's still Shabbos, it's still an obligation. Chacham enough birosho. If he wants to eat well, according to the mitzvah, at all three meals, or at least the two meals of Shabbos day, he should make sure to space them. Eat your second Shabbos meal, the morning meal, earlier in the morning, and don't eat everything that meal. Save something for, let's say, the third meal. That is, don't eat all the meat. Save your children for the third meal and eat some chicken at the second meal, whatever it might be. Okay, plan it out better, and then we could do it. And therefore, if a person would have left off, let's say, that paragraph from his Birkat HaMazon on his grace for the third Shabbos meal, he would have to somehow compensate for it because he had an obligation to eat bread then. That's a Vilna Gaon. I think that would be considered Torah Eretz Yisrael today also in Halakha.